There is unity in the oppression. There must be absolute unity and determination in the response.
Julian Assange is just shining a light on the fact that the big state agencies in particular are not capable of keeping citizen data secure. And so the question is, what happens when there is a breach of data security? You know, whose rights are preserved? And I think there's never been a case in history of shoot the messenger more categorically than the one we're looking at right now. I appreciate in Kim's case, there is a legal question, as I understand it, about the scope of copyright and the discovery by those prosecuting Kim of a range of new rights which did not apparently exist at the time Kim was mega uploading, but I'm not expert on that. But we just see virtually every day of the week, we are seeing a major breach of data security by big agencies which are simply not capable of keeping secure the amount of data which is moving in and out of their hands. And as I understand it, Julian is saying, well, he's A, not going to stop publishing, B, he's not going to give away his sources, but he has offered to work with, for example, some of the US agencies to address some of the more egregious vulnerabilities in their current data management systems. So my question is, let's say we start with Kim.com. If the US came to Julian in a wave of rationality and sanity and said, okay, let's sit down and try and figure out a compact going forward that would actually retain the primacy of citizens' rights to their own data and would have some safety mechanisms for what happens, you know, when the R1 brothers walk off with the emails of 50 congressmen, or when some 15-year-old English boy in a housing commission flat in the Midlands hacks into the, James Clapper's private email addresses 3 or 4 times for the fun of it. What is the architecture of the deal going forward that we should be prepared to accept, Kim.com?
To address your question, we are living in a world today where spy agencies make a great effort to undermine data security. They develop backdoors into devices that we are using. They are developing backdoors for softwares that we are using, and they are even paying developers in large US tech companies to install these backdoors and vulnerabilities on purpose. And one of the major releases of WikiLeaks was Vault 7, in which a large percentage of the US spy arsenal that was created to use these vulnerabilities to spy on us, and we're talking about mass surveillance of the world population, these tools were released. And of course, when tools like this make it into the public domain, they are being used by other spy agencies in other countries, but also criminal organizations who suddenly learn about all these 0 days and vulnerabilities that they can use to hack into computer systems and retrieve all of our data. And we're talking about computer systems that are amongst the most secure, most firewall systems in the world. We're talking about banks, we're talking about government systems. They have all been hacked. And all major enemies of the United States now have access to that data. And that is the cause of the data being in their hands, simply because the US government agencies that were mandated to protect the United States have actually weakened the United States by creating these backdoors, losing control of them, and handing them over to their enemies. And the reality is that if we didn't have organizations like WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, this data would mostly be used in the shadows against us. They will be used by the Chinese, by the Russians, by mafia organizations to profit from them, to learn from them, and to create their own tools. There's now an arms race between intelligence communities in different parts of the world trying to beat each other at this race to get access to our data and all of our devices. So what I can tell you with certainty today is that every camera that is in a digital device, any microphone can be remotely activated to listen to everything that you do and say in your private space. And it's really just a 3-click operation to achieve that. And I know that because they have done that in my case. And through my own discovery work and with my lawyers, I was able to identify exactly what they did. And my mobile phone, my iPhone that was sitting on my desk, was basically used as an open microphone to surveil me and my entire family for a period of over a month. They have all of that transcripted in a digital format, and I've been fighting in the courts for many years now to get access to that data, which is legally my data. So I'm the best example of how these backdoors and vulnerabilities are being used. And this is the reality we are living in today, unfortunately.
Ross makes a very, very good point. He's made it a number of times, I know, because I've lived in this country with him. This is a case of shooting the messenger. In fact, that it is one of the most demonstrable cases of shooting the messenger and a misuse of the criminal law to shoot a messenger. But the point Ross makes also is a very valid point, which is in a rational, if this were a rational sphere, these agencies would be working with Julian. As we know, there were some offers made. I think there was that piece written there in the US publication, The Hill, earlier in the year, indicating that that was the case. It's extraordinary that we don't have, in this particular case, these agencies wanting to sit down and work with the person who's been able to, who can facilitate a much better result for them.
Ross has made an interesting point, and Greg has made an interesting point. Is there space for diplomacy in Julian's case? Is there a way that the US government could make a deal with Julian Assange by either giving them some sort of advance notice of his publications, or maybe not publishing some things that really affect national security? And here's the problem with that proposition. This is what major media outlets have done. This is what the New York Times have done, what the Washington Post has done, and what the Guardian has done. They had access to information that I think was of utmost importance to the public about mass surveillance, about almost criminal conduct by the government and abuses of power, and they held on to that. And they did not release that information. And I think one of the reasons why people trust WikiLeaks, why whistleblowers and truth tellers again and again choose WikiLeaks to release information, is because they can trust Julian to release the material and to put it out there. That is what whistleblowers want. They are privy to some sort of crime or injustice. They work in organizations that are supposed to do good. And when they do evil, there are some individuals like Edward Snowden who have a soul, who have a heart, and say, this is just wrong on so many levels, and the world needs to know this information. And right now in the world, there's only one place you can trust to publish that information, and that is WikiLeaks. Now, any kind of deal with the US government would, of course, taint WikiLeaks' position in the truth-telling arena. So one has to be very careful. Is the priority to win some kind of settlement that lets Julian go free at the cost of the information becoming available to the public? Or should WikiLeaks continue their fight through the courts with our help to remain a strong publisher for the truth, untainted, unfiltered truth? I know WikiLeaks is going into great efforts to make sure that the information they release is accurate and does not contain personal information, and they take their time to go through it to not harm anyone. But the way WikiLeaks is today is because there is no deal with any government about what can be published and what can't be published. And I think that needs to be maintained. It might not be ideal for Julian's legal team, and I get what Greg is saying and why he's suggesting what he's suggesting. My lawyers have suggested to me several times to do a deal with the US government, but you would have to compromise your integrity. You would have to compromise what you stand for. And I don't think Julian is the kind of guy who would do that, and I wouldn't advise it. Oh, and